Hi everyone, this is John Gerardi with Right to Life of Central California, bringing you another in our 40 videos for 40 days series. 40 Days for Life is the international campaign of prayer and presence outside abortion clinics throughout the country and throughout the world. If you want to learn more about our 40 Days for Life campaign here in Fresno, get in touch with us at Right to Life at 559-229-2229. Today on the broadcast, I want to talk a little bit about some of the issues relating to abortion. As you all know, in the state of California, we don't have laws requiring that parents consent before a minor's abortion. And the idea is that minors on their own, without their parents' knowledge, without their parents' consent, have this exception to normal laws. Normal laws require that parents give consent before any health care treatment for their minor children. Abortion is an exception to this. So a minor as young as 12 can get an abortion without her parents knowing. And schools will even, in many cases, will take the child to get an abortion without telling the parents, even in certain cases, lying to the parents about where the kid is. And this is all perfectly legal in the state of California. Now, I just want to highlight sort of the notion of why we just absolutely should not, in any way, shape, or form, be allowing minors to make the abortion decision. I don't think I need to elaborate on it too much for you, but there are just a couple of things to think about within this context. The basic principle for why we don't think minors should be able to choose whether or not to have an abortion, or it should at the very least would need their parents' consent before having abortion, which used to be California law until it was struck down by the California State Supreme Court, is basically the general notion we have that minors lack the competence to make various kinds of decisions for themselves. I touched on this a little in yesterday's broadcast, a little more than I expected I would. Throughout American law, we have certain assumptions about what minors can and cannot do. We don't trust minors to do a lot of different kinds of things, and legally they cannot do various kinds of things. As I mentioned yesterday on the broadcast, minors in many cases cannot sign legally binding contracts. The basketball player Kobe Bryant, who was drafted into the NBA right out of high school, his first contract that he signed with the Los Angeles Lakers, he was 17 years old at the time, and as a result, his parents had to sign it. There are a number of other areas in which minors cannot consent to various kinds of things. As we mentioned, healthcare. Most healthcare treatments, minors can't consent to them. You need parents' permission first. Even when a minor joins the military, for example, it's legal for a 17-year-old to enlist in the military. The parent needs to sign off, give permission for that minor to go join the military. And then in California, a minor who is a member of the military can give his or her own consent for medical treatment. Okay, but even so, you required the parent's permission first. We don't think minors can consent to medical care. We don't think minors can consent to. We don't think minors can vote even. Minors are not allowed to vote. You're not allowed to vote until you're 18. And it's this just broad sense throughout American life that minors lack certain capacities. They lack a certain amount of judgment, lack a certain amount of life experience, lack a certain amount of intellect, lack a certain amount of maybe even whatever it is. We think that minors are basically not capable to make certain kinds of decisions, and we draw a hard line at the age of 18. Now, it's obviously a somewhat artificial line. I'm sure there are 17-year-olds who have the competence to make all of those kinds of decisions, and I'm sure there are 19-year-olds who probably shouldn't be making any of those kinds of decisions. But at the very least, we are making a sort of determination that you have to be above a certain age before you can consent to various kinds of things. Yet, for some reason, in spite of the fact that the activity that leads to pregnancy, minors cannot legally choose, and then this is a point to make, all acts of sex involving minors, those minors are not legally allowed to make. All acts of sex involving minors are statutory rape. Now, even if it involves a 15-year-old with another 15-year-old, it is technically still an act of statutory rape. Now, Often those kinds of scenarios aren't prosecuted because it's not really, it's hard to identify, well, who's the perpetrator and who's the victim. But sometimes if authorities are informed of two minors having sex, in certain rare occasions, they might require those young people to take a sort of community education course of some sort, letting them know about, or through some kind of state agency, letting them know about the dangers of premarital of underage sex, whether it's for health concerns, whether it's for teenage pregnancy, or what have you. It's not an impossible thing. So any act of minors having sex, minors aren't allowed to consent to it. But to have abortions, minors are allowed to consent to it and to keep that information private and secret from their parents. It makes very little sense. Now, the pro-choice side will say, well, and even the California State Supreme Court admitted that having parental guidance in the abortion decision is such an important thing, but that there are certain exceptional circumstances where perhaps a parent is abusive, that such that the law should be, no, children have the right to keep that secret. It's almost like our default position is set up for exceptional situations of parental abuse. Our default situation is that minors don't have to tell their parents, which seems to have in consideration the exceptional situation of parents who are abusive. For California law to be at all sensible, it should acknowledge, one, that premarital sex is, in fact, unlawful. That parents should be involved when they have children who are going through something like that. The parents need to be more involved, in fact. And that the decision of whether or not to have an abortion, minors are simply not prepared to make. And to have parental involvement in that process is a healthy thing that should be the default posture for the state. For Right to Life of Central California, I'm John Gerardi.